If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And please join me on my website at nanice.com. Thank you.
It's your time for Chai with Nanice. Get ready for substance, clarity, change, and especially empowerment. Get ready to turn over stones, uncover stories, and get to the heart of the matter in every area of your life. Any mood runs, any emotion flies, and your dreams are within your grasp. There are no limits or boundaries, and your comfort zone is out of reach, yet it's the safest place you will ever be. Come in, sit down, and have some chai with Nanice.
Welcome to Chai with Nanice. I'm Nanice. Well, if you've been listening to the show, you know that I've been gone the last couple of weeks, and for good reason. I actually just got back from Burning Man, and it was my second time. For those of you who don't know what Burning Man is, it's called an arts festival, but that's really not what it's about. Burning Man is a city that comes together once a year, and nothing exists in the desert where the city is built before or after. It's absolutely amazing. I believe it becomes the third largest city in Nevada, believe it or not. And in this week that people come together from all over the world, miracles and magic just explode everywhere and from everyone. It truly is life-changing. My first time was last year, and, to tell you the truth, I was kind of manipulated into going to Burning Man. I didn't think that it was something that was for me, and, I just kept putting it off for years, even though I was interested. And then finally a friend asked me to teach at one of the camps there, and I went, and I spent the week teaching. And in that week, I learned things about myself and about life and about others that I don't think would have been possible to learn in any other way. And this year when I went back, the same experience continued. The biggest gift that Burning Man offers is this ability to live in a community of 55,000 people, literally from all over the world, and everyone works together. And the 7 or 8 days that I was there, I never saw one fight, one disagreement, one problem. All I saw was people helping each other. All I witnessed and experienced was friends coming together, friends of different languages and different nations, friends of different backgrounds, that everyone was there to support each other. And one of the interesting things about Burning Man is that no money is exchanged. People don't bring money to Burning Man. And it's not even barter or trade. It's about gifting. And you wonder, how does this work? And it does. It does work. And the reason I think it works is because our consciousness as a planet is changing. Our consciousness, individually and collectively, is rising to a level where we are really learning how to work together. One of my greatest experiences at Burning Man this year was actually the burn, where I witnessed an enormous event where people just came together in literally a rush when this Burning Man went down to the ground, which symbolizes letting go of the past. And, Mob Control, I would think, would not think that this was a good idea. But the next thing that I knew, I was in a crowd and I was being ushered to the front, and people were just moving in a circle. And I thought to myself, how does this happen? How do we do this without hurting each other or killing each other? How is this possible? And the reason that it was possible and is possible is because we truly are learning to work together. And in this way, we have come together to change the world. You've heard me say this on the show before, that I believe that each and every one of us is on the planet today to help bring in a new world, to help bring our Earth to a paradise. And it is not only possible, I know it is happening, and it's happening now. And so you are involved in this transformation. And today's show is really going to help you understand how you have a lot more power in the economic point of this world than you ever thought possible. Today, my guest is John Perkins. I'm really excited to have him on the show. He is going to offer us a blueprint for a new form of global economics. Let me tell you a little bit about John first. John had the official title of chief economist at a major international consulting firm during the 1970s. He advised the World Bank, United Nations, International Monetary Fund, U.S. Treasury Department, Fortune 500 corporations, and countries in Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Middle East. In his role as economic hitman, he worked directly with heads of state and CEOs of major companies to promote and develop the types of projects described in Confessions of an Economic Hitman, a book that spent more than 65 weeks on the New York bestsellers list. He has been published in over 30 languages and is required reading at universities and business schools at the United States and many other countries. During the 1980s, he was CEO of an alternative energy company that was a pioneer in developing environmentally beneficial power plants. He devoted much of his time in 1990s and the 2000s not only in writing and lecturing, but also to establishing and supporting Dream Change, the Pachamama, I think I'm saying that right, Pachamama Alliance, and other nonprofit organizations that are committed to creating a sustainable, just, and peaceful world. Now, his new book called Hoodwink, we're going to be talking about today, and as I mentioned, it's a blueprint for a new form of global economics. He says the solutions are not a return to normal. Instead, John challenged us to soar to new heights away from predatory capitalism and into an era more transformative than the agricultural and industrial revolutions. Hoodwink details specific steps each of us can take to create a sustainable, just, and peaceful world. John, welcome to Chai with Nanice. Thanks for having Chai with me today.
Thanks so much for having me here, Nanice. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, my pleasure. So first, share with our listeners what exactly is an economic hitman?
Well, I think it's fair to say that we economic hitmen have really created the world's first truly global empire. And it's the first empire in the history of the world that's been created primarily without the military, through economics. And the way that we work many different ways, but perhaps the most common is that we'll identify a third world country that has resources that corporations covet, like oil, and then arrange a huge loan to that country from the World Bank or one of its sister organizations. But the money doesn't actually go to the country. Instead, it goes to our own corporations to build infrastructure projects in their country, things like power plants and industrial parks that benefit a few wealthy people in that country, as well as our own corporations, but don't help the majority of the people who are too poor to buy electricity, and industrial parks don't hire many people anyway. So these people don't benefit from these projects. However, the wealthy families do, and the poor people are left holding a huge debt, and it's a debt that they can never repay. So at some point we go back into that country and we say, hey, listen, since you can't pay your debts, you owe us a pound of flesh. Sell your oil real cheap to our oil companies, or vote with us on some critical United Nations vote, or allow us to build a military base on your soil, something along those lines. And Nanice, in a few cases when we fail, and I talk in my books about how I failed with the democratically elected president of Ecuador, Jaime Roldos, and of Panama, Omar Torrijos. In those cases, the jackals go in, and these are people who either overthrow governments or assassinate their leaders. Both Roldos and Torrijos were assassinated because I failed to corrupt them. I failed to bring them around to get them to buy into this deal.
So we're really talking about corporations taking over the world and representing those corporations taking over the world. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. I think when I say we've created the first global empire in the history of the world, it's really a corporate empire. And the modern equivalent of the emperor is not a president of a country, or it's the leaders of these corporations. It's a group of people, a fairly small group. And this isn't a conspiracy theory, incidentally. These people don't have to conspire to do anything illegal. Often they don't even know each other. But they're all driven by one goal, and that is to maximize profits regardless of the social and environmental costs. And in realizing that goal, they really formed this new type of an empire. Where I think we're at a time in history, Nanice, that is roughly like when the city-states became nations, except today the nations have pretty much lost their relevance and their power, and so have presidents. It's been taken over by big corporations. It's a really new form of geopolitics.
So without anybody really being aware of it in the world, these corporations have figured out legally how to go into third world countries and take over the countries, take over the resources, and really just to control the world in this aspect. Is that what I'm hearing you say, John?
Oh, it's yes, and yet I would say that I think a lot of people are aware of it. I think particularly in other parts of the world, people are aware that it's going on in their country. The Ecuadorians are very aware that it's happening there. The Nigerians and the Congolese and the Indonesians and people around the world are very aware that this is happening to them and has been happening. And certainly some of the world leaders from other countries have talked about this. How it's happening on an international basis. So there are quite a few people aware of it, but it certainly hasn't been overt in the same way that old empires were overt when, for example, the Portuguese, the Spanish, the English, the French, when they formed their empires, they did it through military action, and everybody knew they were doing it, and they usually bragged about it. They were proud, we're going in to save the world for Christianity, or save the, or civilize the world. They always had grandiose reasons, but the fact was they were primarily going in to exploit resources, and that's what we're still doing. It is a much more subtle form, yes.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So I have so many questions for you, but first, how does somebody become an economic hitman and then at some point just have a complete change? And there must have been something that happened to make you wake up to realize that maybe you were not going in the right direction.
Absolutely, and I should start by saying that what I did as an economic hitman was not illegal. It should be. But the thing I just described, using the World Bank, et cetera, this way, there's nothing illegal about it. And in fact, when I went to business school in the late '60s, this sort of thing was considered to be the right approach to development, and in fact, it still is. The idea of investing huge amounts of money in infrastructure projects is still very much on the front burner in business schools. But so when I first went into this business, I was trained by a woman named Claudine, who was a pretty remarkable person. I talk about her in my books. And I had first gone through a series of tests by the National Security Agency, who had identified me as a potentially good economic hitman. And they also identified that I had three traits that would make it fairly easy to hook me, to bring me in. And I think these are the three big drugs of our culture, perhaps: that power, money, and sex. And as a young man, I was addicted to all of them. I wanted all of them. I never had much of any of them. I wanted all of them. And,
did you get them?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
And I've been through the series of tests by the National Security Agency, a lie detector test, personality test. And so then I went in the Peace Corps. I was in the Amazon for 3 years. And when I came out, even while I was there, actually, I was being recruited for this position. And then I was hired by a private consulting firm, Charles T. Main of Boston. And incidentally, this sort of work is almost done entirely by private firms working for the corporatocracy, the corporations and the government. But I was trained by this woman named Claudine, and she knew all about me. She knew my weaknesses, and she was smart enough to really lead me on with all of these. So she was the first to introduce me to the potentials of getting all of these three weaknesses, these three drugs taken care of. And she told me, this is a dirty business. It's not illegal, but you're going to find over time that it's a dirty business. But once you're in for life. And I, of course, thought I would be the exception. I think we often do. But I muddled on for 10 years as an economic hitman, and I did a good job at it. But during that period of time, I continually saw more and more that what we were doing was wrong, and that it was the opposite of what the World Bank said we were doing, which the World Bank said we were getting rid of poverty around the world. And in fact, we were doing exactly the opposite. Many more people were becoming impoverished, and the gap between rich and poor was growing. And so after 10 years, my conscience had really begun to bother me. And one day I was on vacation sailing in the Virgin Islands, and I climbed up on this hill where there was an old sugarcane plantation, and I sat there as the sun was setting over the Caribbean. It was a very idyllic location with bougainvillea going over these ruins of this old plantation. And then suddenly I was struck by the fact that this plantation, this beautiful spot, had been built on the bones of thousands of slaves. And then I had to realize that the whole hemisphere was built on the bones of millions of slaves. And after that, I had to admit that I was the modern equivalent of a slaver. And I decided I'd get out. I'd never do it again. And I went back after that vacation and quit.
Wow. So you were the exception.
Well, yeah, it took me 10 years. And, and part of that point, I decided I needed to write about this to expose this system. And I started writing the book that eventually became Confessions of an Economic Hitman. And I contacted other economic hitmen and jackals to get their story. And then I received anonymous phone calls, threats, serious threats. My daughter was born in 82. Her life was threatened. And at the same time, the chairman of the board of Stone & Webster, a big consulting firm out of New York and Boston, took me out to dinner, and he said, you have a great resume. And of course I did. I'd been chief economist of one of his competitors. He said, we'd like to use your resume in proposals. You don't have to do any work for us. Just let us use your resume, and we'll pay you a $500,000 retainer, consultant's retainer. Just don't write the book that you're working on, that I know you're working on. Mm-hmm. So I'm getting these threats, and I'm getting this bribe. It's a legal bribe, but it was a bribe. And I took the threats very seriously. I'd seen what the jackals could do, and so I have to admit that I took the bribe. And I'll say that I did some good things with it. I didn't just run off and, treat myself to nice cars and houses. I put a lot of the money toward helping people in the countries that I had been hurting. And out of this grew the Dream Change and Pachamama Alliance and other nonprofit organizations that people can find on the web if they want to get more information. So I sort of assuaged my guilt, but I didn't do what I knew I should do, which was to write the book. And then on 9/11, I was in the Amazon, and afterwards I flew up to ground zero. And as I stood there looking into that smoldering pit, I knew I finally had to write the book. But I decided I would do it totally in secret. I'd write the whole book, not a book proposal, the whole book. And I did that without telling my wife or daughter what I was working on. And when I got the book finished and sent it out to the publishers, it then became my best insurance policy, because any good jackal knows that when a book, if the author of a book like that disappears or dies mysteriously, the book will sell millions more copies than it would have otherwise, and that's still the case. If something were dire to happen to me today, even though the book has now sold over 1 million copies, it would sell 10 times that many if something dire were to happen to me today.
It takes a lot of courage to stand out and step out like that. That is monumental.
Well, thank you, and I hear that, but it actually at the point when I finally did it, I didn't feel very courageous. I felt like I finally had to do it.
Yeah, it's interesting that I think that's what true courage does to us. That we have no other choice. That we have to do it. That something inside of us kind of bubbles up until there's no choice. Wow, that's pretty amazing. So you say that this current economic crisis is not a fluke. What do you mean by that?
Well, we've been headed in this direction, and I really look at the current economic crisis as having its roots in about 1970. Before that, most world leaders and corporations followed the economics of John Maynard Keynes, and that's what I was brought up with in business school in the 60s. And Keynesian capitalism is quite compassionate in many respects, but in the 70s, at the time I was an economic hitman, along came Milton Friedman of the Chicago School of Economics, and he was espousing a form of capitalism that's anything but compassionate. It's really based on three principles. One, that I mentioned, the only responsibility of business, according to this principle, is to maximize profits, regardless of the social and environmental costs. And two, businesses shouldn't be regulated because that gets in the way of making profits. And three, everything should be run by business, private business. Everything should be privatized, the schools, the jails, the military, which of course we're seeing happening today in places like Afghanistan where the military is being privatized. And in 1980, Ronald Reagan became president, and he openly embraced this new theory of economics espoused by Milton Friedman. So did Margaret Thatcher and other world leaders, and it was immediately swept up as being the gospel. And every U.S. president since, Democrat and Republican alike, has embraced it. It's a very mean-spirited, very greedy, selfish, unsustainable form of capitalism. It's an economic theory that just plain really isn't working for anybody except the very rich and very powerful. And it's brought us to a world where less than 5% of us live in the United States, and we consume more than 25% of the world's resources. And, you know, all you can really say, Nanice, about a situation like that is it's a failure. It's not a model you can pass on to Africa or Latin America, India. It's a failure. And so we're now seeing the repercussions of that. We're seeing that this is not a fluke, this economic crisis. It's telling us that we have a sick economic system that is a failure.
Yes. And so the answer is not putting a Band-Aid on it like so many programs are out there and Obama talking about. It's really about creating something different and something new.
It is. I think it's structural, and it's why we're seeing that all that we've done so far has not brought us out of the recession. It has not really turned things around, and despite what the politicians tell us, it's not going to. We're going to have to turn this around structurally. And I think it's not that difficult, really. What we have to do is redefine those goals, and we have to say that instead of this goal of maximizing profits, regardless of social and environmental costs, businesses should serve the public interest. Businesses should all have a goal of creating a sustainable, just, and peaceful world. And none of us should buy anything from any company that isn't committed to that. I mean, we the people really have a lot of control here. We have a lot more control than the president does or anyone else, because ultimately these corporations that are ruling the world today depend on us to buy their goods and services. And for a long time we've been willing to say, listen, we want cheap tennis shoes and T-shirts, and if they're made in sweatshops by slaves in Indonesia, we'll just turn the other way. And we want cheap petroleum for our cars, and if that means destroying the Amazon rainforest, we'll just look the other way. And we sent this message very strongly to these corporations, and so we need to turn that around and say, listen, we're not going to buy anything that isn't made by a company that's committed to creating a world that my 3-year-old grandson and every other child on this planet is going to want to grow up in.
Yes. So it's so interesting that this piece alone, because so many people feel that they don't have any power or control over what happens in the world. And I'm a life coach. I don't know if you know that, and I've coached people all over the world, and it's really interesting because even people that feel powerful in their own lives don't really feel powerful in the world. And there's a common, belief that, well, what is little old me? What can I do to change the world? And really what you're saying from this perspective alone is that we really do have the power to change the world. And it comes down to a simple and small choices that we make each and every day.
Yeah. We do have the power. And it's always been we the people who've had to do it. I often think about how, we didn't get rid of slavery in this country because Lincoln found himself in the White House. We got rid of slavery because we, the people, voted in a guy who was committed to getting rid of slavery, and then we fought a civil war over it.
Right.
Women didn't get the right to vote because Woodrow Wilson was pro-suffrage. He was not. But women followed him around everywhere he went. And as he made speeches demanding that we go to war in Europe to defend democracy in Europe, the women carried placards and shouted him down and said things like, we're not going to send our men off to defend democracy in Europe when we don't have democracy in the United States. Mm-hmm. We women can't vote. That's not a democracy. And, in more recent times, we've cleaned up terribly polluted rivers in the United States because we forced corporations to clean them up. And we got rid of apartheid in South Africa by boycotting corporations that supported it. We've recently got trans fats out of foods and antibiotics out of chickens. We have a lot of power over these businesses, and now we need to ratchet it up a notch and say, listen, we're not just going to go after aerosol cans or antibiotics in chickens. we're going to go after the principle behind this, and that is this concept that the only responsibility of business is to make profits, regardless of what they do to society and the environment. We're not going to allow that to happen anymore. We're only going to buy from companies that are committed to creating a sustainable, just, and peaceful world. And we, the people, have the power to do that.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And it seems to me that we are at this time in our world that's why we're here. We're here to change the world. We're here to take our power back, and we're here to make choices that support a sustainable world for us and for our children. And I totally get what you say about your grandchild. I just became a grandmother myself about 9 months ago, and you look into those little innocent eyes, and the way the world has been going, you think, wow, this might not be so good for him. So now is the time to make the changes.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yes, you look into the eyes of your grandchild or your child or any child. And, we have to also, Nanice, realize that for the first time in history, and this is truly the first time, that child growing up in the United States can't expect to have homeland security until we understand that the whole planet's our homeland. And that child in the United States can't expect to grow up in a sustainable, just, and peaceful world unless every child growing up in Bolivia and Botswana and Israel and Palestine has that same expectation. And it's realized for all of them. And this is new. It used to be, that if you lived in L.A. and you took care of your community there in the United States, everything, that's all you need to worry about. But that's no longer true. We're living on an incredibly tiny, integrated planet, and we must understand that it's true. We can't have homeland security until we know that the whole Earth is our homeland, and we, the people, need to make that happen.
John, you are so brilliant. You're so brilliant. Yes, and they say that there's 5 degrees of separation, but from a spiritual perspective, I don't believe that's true. I think that we're all connected, that whatever one being does, it affects everyone and everything on the planet. And if we really all are from one, then it could be no other way. So what I do and what you do and, what our listeners do, that it really is affecting everyone. And so, it's like, how can I justify some of the things that I might do or buy in this case in my life? Really, it's adversely affecting someone around the world or many people around the world. That has to affect me. Important. Yes. Yeah. I'm sorry.
It's just so important. I love the way you put that, Nanice, and it's so important that all your listeners really get that, and everyone gets it. It's because it hasn't been this way before. This is a real change. And it also is true that for the first time in history, we're all communicating with each other.
Yes.
A few years ago, I was up in the Himalayas in Tibet and talking to a nomadic chieftain up there who was lamenting the fact that his people didn't have telephones, and they never would because the phones would never reach that high in the Himalayas. And I'd hear the same things from tribal leaders in the Amazon. But today, those people have cellular satellite cell phones. And we're all communicating with each other through the internet and cell phones. So for the first time in history, we human beings are all talking together. And we're really understanding that we are a very fragile species living on a very tiny spaceship. And the only way we're going to survive as a species on a planet that any of us would recognize and want to recognize is if we all come together and understand that we must create a sustainable planet and a just planet and just societies. And this is truly unique in history. That's never happened before, and I think a lot of us don't really get that. And we don't get the fact that, it's not enough for us to stop drilling oil off our coast and have those oil rigs move to Egypt or Indonesia, as they're currently doing. That's not the answer. The answer is to get off oil. It's not just to protect our own coast. We must not be so narrow-minded anymore. We must look at the whole planet as our homeland.
It's because the planet's demanding this. It can be no other way. The planet is absolutely requesting that we change. Yes.
Yeah, I recently led a group of people to some shamans in South America, and one of the people in our group asked one of the shamans, so how do we save Mother Earth. And I was translating at the time, and the shaman answered, the Mother Earth isn't in danger. We're not threatening Mother Earth. We may change the Earth, but we're really only threatening ourselves and many other species. Right. And he said, but, we're like so many fleas on the Earth, and if we get to be too much of a nuisance, she'll just shake us all off. And he said, she's twitching right now. The glaciers are melting. The oceans are rising, and she's twitching. She's letting us know. She's sending a strong message. So let's respond to that message. And let's really take this seriously and listen to it.
Yes.
The world of
John, I think you're cutting out a little bit. I don't hear you.
Really? Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yes.
Okay, yes. Sorry. I don't know what happened.
Okay.
I didn't do anything different.
Oh, you just disappeared for a second. Sometimes that happens with technology. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that we're not destroying the planet, but we might be destroying humanity, and the planet's giving us big warnings, which is such a gift because now we get the opportunity to listen to those warnings. So John, tell me about the revolution against mutant capitalism, how it's sweeping Latin America. I think this is fascinating, and I'd love for you to share this with our listeners today.
Well, yes, this form of capitalism that Milton Friedman espoused and we've all bought into as societies today is, I call it predatory capitalism. And capitalism's been around about 400 years. It's taken many different forms, and this most recent one is one of the most malicious yet and unsustainable. And I think Latin America has really gotten it. 10 countries, and representing more than 80% of the population of South America, have recently voted in presidents that in varying degrees have said, no more of this. We're not going to be exploited anymore by the corporatocracy and the people that run these corporations. We need corporations to come in and help us drill for oil and gas because we don't have the technology, but they've got to give back a fair share of the profits to our people and protect the environment. People like Rafael Correa, president of Ecuador, who has a PhD in economics from Illinois, he says, I'm a capitalist. I believe in that, but I don't see any reason why capitalism can't result in having my people benefit from the oil beneath their land in a significant way, and why we can't protect the land while drilling for it. And these presidents are not opposing us in the United States. They're not railing against our government. They're understanding that it's the corporations that are calling the shots. And they're not even opposing the corporations. They're simply saying that the corporations have to change. They have to be more responsible and more responsive. And I think this is an amazing case of leadership. It's important also to know that every one of these 10 countries during most of my lifetime was run by brutal dictators. Every single one of those 10 countries was run by brutal dictators, usually put into power by the CIA and kept there by the CIA until very recently. And suddenly all of that has changed. It's a watershed moment, and I think it's a tremendous guiding light.
Why do you think the change was so easy? Or I don't know if it was easy, but it sounds easy if it was done in such a short period of time. Because it sounds monumental. So how did that change really happen? Like what was the shift that made that happen?
Well, it's really a change of consciousness. I think the people of these countries understood. They began to really see how they were being terribly exploited, and a number of leaders, charismatic people, came along, and writers and came along and it said, we can't put up with this anymore. And one of the things that happened in 2002 was that Hugo Chavez, the president of Venezuela, was overthrown in a CIA coup, but he withstood it. Within 40 hours, he was back in power. The people of Venezuela took to the streets, demanded that he come back into power. And I think at that point, all over Latin America, it was seen that the CIA and Washington was really a paper tiger. The Bush administration was a paper tiger. And this gave a tremendous amount of confidence to some of these other countries. But it had been building over time, and a lot of it came from indigenous people and their leadership. They are the ones responsible for Correa being elected in Ecuador and Evo Morales in Bolivia and a number of other presidents, because they said, listen, we have these principles that we've always been living with, that we've always understood, that the earth is speaking to us. And the earth is sacred, and we must take care of her, and we must look to the future generations, the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh generation. This is part of our heritage, and we want this to be part of the way that our countries govern themselves. And so there was this change of consciousness. And actually, Nanice, I think it's happening in the United States. I'm feeling it. The fact we're having this discussion on your show,
yes.
And I have I'm on a lot of radio shows and speaking tours that we talk about these things. And 10 years ago, that wouldn't have happened. So I feel that there's a real change of consciousness occurring around the planet right now. I just came back from China. I felt it in China. I felt it in Iceland. I felt it in many places. I think it's becoming quite global, and I'm very excited about it.
That is exciting. So how do you think that happens? I mean, how do you think that all of a sudden all over the world, like people are waking up and becoming more conscious and getting that we're connected to each other and future generations and the earth? What do you think is really happening there?
Well, it's almost organic. It starts someplace and then moves on, and suddenly lots of radio shows are talking about like The Constant Gardener and Hotel Rwanda and Blood Diamond and the Al Gore movie, and there's lots of books being published out there. These things happen, and I'm often reminded how when I was a kid growing up in rural New Hampshire, my dad and I used to spray DDT on the swamp behind our land. We had no idea that in addition to killing the mosquitoes that we wanted to kill, that was also killing birds and fish, until one woman, Rachel Carson, sat down and wrote a book, Silent Spring. And when she wrote that book, she had no idea that it would even ever be published. But in fact, it became organic, and not only did it teach us about DDT, but it started a whole global environmental movement. And I'm also often reminded how growing up in New Hampshire, I had no idea that African Americans in many parts of my country had to ride on the back of the bus until Rosa Parks walked to the front of a bus. Yes. And by doing that one action, she changed everything. And, it's organic. So it starts someplace. There's something along that happens, and then people catch on, and it spreads. And I feel that's what's happening now. It's really spreading. People are really, really catching on. I do a lot of lecturing at MBA programs and universities, and in the last 5 years, I've seen the students really change their goals from being totally oriented toward power and money to now saying, well, gee, I want to have kids someday. I want to have a family, and I want my kids to be able to go to the Amazon and live in a world where they dare drink the water and eat the food.
Yes, beautifully said. Yeah, it seems to me that it's also this shift from going from the head to the heart, because for so long we have been living from the head around the world in most cultures, or certainly here in the United States, and it seems that we're shifting down into the heart, that we're really that we're not just looking at things and how they make sense on paper or whatever, but we're feeling, and we're not just feeling for ourselves, but we're feeling, I think a greater sense of compassion and empathy is taking over, and people really are starting to think about each other, and that's pretty remarkable considering where we've come from.
It is beautiful, isn't it? Yeah, I agree with you. I think we're listening. We're opening our hearts wider to accept the messages. It's. Not too long ago, I was in the Amazon with the Shuar people who had been a Peace Corps volunteer back in the 60s, and these are people who live what we call primitive lives, deep in the jungle. And I took a hike with two young warriors, young men, up to the sacred waterfalls. We spent 2 nights up there doing ceremony, and on the way back, the third day, just as we came fairly close to their community, and they stopped and bent down and examined the little plant, and then they said to me, this plant is sick. It wasn't sick 3 days ago when we went up there, when we came by here. And I looked at the plant and, it had a few brown leaves, but I didn't see that it was particularly sick. And, there's millions of plants in the Amazon. We've gone by millions of plants. How did these guys pick this one out? But that night they called a meeting of the elders, and they explained about this plant. And all night long the elders talked about this. And at the end they decided that there was no proof, but perhaps that plant was sending a message that the trail had been overused. And if that was the case, if there's any possibility that's the message that was being sent, and that by using that trail more, they were threatening the future of their children, then they would close down the trail. And they did. And a few days later, I'm back in the United States, driving in my car from the airport and listening to NPR radio, and there's a debate going on. This is a few years ago, in Washington, about whether human beings are causing global warming or not. And at that point, the argument was being made that we couldn't prove that we're causing global warming, and since we couldn't prove it, we shouldn't do anything. And I was so struck, Nanice, by the contrast. Supposedly primitive, uneducated people in the middle of the jungle, they're smart enough to say that if there's a possibility that we're threatening our children and our grandchildren's future, we're not going to do it. Right. Whereas we, the most scientifically advanced country on the planet, take exactly the opposite stance. And that's all about heart, like you said. And I think what happened since then is we really have opened our hearts and said, well, maybe we can't prove some of these things, but let's act responsibly. Let's take the responsible path anyway.
Yes. Well, beautifully said. So I'm curious. John, do you think that you were destined for this path? Do you think that your life led up to being this representative really for the planet and taking responsibility for oneself?
Wow, you're talking deep philosophy now.
Yes.
Indigenous people I've worked with around the world, and I've worked with them in many different cultures, they all seem to have this belief that we come into this life at this particular point in time with a mission. Most of them believe in reincarnation, but they say we choose this particular life at this particular time in history for a reason. Yes. And I listen to that, and I do believe that probably there's sort of the karmic, if you from the Buddhist standpoint, that there's a certain karma there, and that I did choose this route. I also feel we all have free will, and we can change that route. But and what's really important is how do we react to the various fates that come our way. And I had the fate to become an economic hitman. How did I end up reacting to that? I got out, and then I got angry at what economic hitmen were doing, and I got angry at 9/11 and the fact that not just that 3,000 people died there, but the fact that around the world the United States is looked at as evil. And because of things that I did and things I understood, and getting angry rather than beating myself up constantly or doing something destructive, I funneled that anger, that energy, into writing books and going on speaking tours. And so, I do believe in karma, but I also think that we have a certain amount of free will, and we have to choose how we're going to use the energy that comes our way, how we're going to use the emotions, how do we use the anger that we have, how do we use the sadness that we have, how do we use the happiness we have, where do we direct those energies?
Wow, that was beautiful. Thank you. Yes, I agree with that. Absolutely. Absolutely. Your path has been a beautiful one. Your path has been an absolute beautiful one. And so I've got two more questions for you. We only have a few minutes left. And one of those is, well, how do we as consumers know what companies to buy from? I mean, is there an easy way? Can we go on the internet and figure it out? Like, I want to go be able to shop and know exactly, what companies I should support and what companies I shouldn't.
Well, it is an evolving process, and the information is not all there at this point. I constantly encourage young people to go out and develop systems for really understanding this better and for making it clearer. Things like, we know now when we buy food how many calories are in it and how much fat and how much protein. We didn't know that not so long ago. I think we need to have truth in labeling a lot more along these lines. But the fact is that even today there is a lot of information, and people can go to dreamchange.org. Dream Change is a nonprofit I created about 20 years ago, and there are links on there to many, many different companies. So if you're looking for tennis shoes, you can go to that link. If you're looking for T-shirts, you can go to that link, and it gives you a lot of information.
Awesome.
So it is there. It takes a little bit of work, and I'm hoping that soon, we'll be able to hold our cell phones up to every product, and a barcode will tell us the whole life cycle of the product. And I know people are working on that. But today we have to work with a little bit. We have to put a little bit more effort into it. But the information is there.
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. That was dreamchange.org, is that right?
That's right.
Awesome. And so I want to know, what do you envision for our future? What do you see?
Well, I think we're at this tipping point in history, Nanice, where we, if we stay the course, we're going to create a very ugly world for my 3-year-old grandson and your grandchild.
Yes.
But I think if we really wake up, as I see we're doing, and demand that we create a world, and that our corporations and our governments create a world that's sustainable and just and peaceful and spiritually fulfilling, then we will move down a very, very beautiful path, perhaps unlike any human society has seen before. It's up to us.
Yes.
And, my job and yours is to get the information out there and encourage and inspire people to really push for it. And I think we all must do that. And, be very conscious of what you buy, be very conscious of what you do. And beyond that, if you decide not to buy anything from Nike because they have sweatshops in Indonesia, and I won't buy anything from Nike because of that, send them an email. And I send them a lot of emails and tell them why you're not buying from them. And if enough of us do things like this, it will turn things around. And so I think if we really follow our consciences, follow our hearts, and take these appropriate actions, we can create something very, very special.
Do you think that's going to happen? I mean, do you see that things are going in that direction?
I feel it. I'm very encouraged.
Yes.
Obviously we don't know for sure, but yes, in the last 5 years, as I've been speaking at many, many colleges and universities, and I've seen such a change in young people just in the past 5 years of attitude and consciousness that I'm very encouraged.
Yes, I am too. Wow. And I'm even more encouraged after listening to you today. Thank you. And so, John, how can people find out more? Can you, how can they get your book, Hoodwinked, and your other books as well? If you'd share that, that'd be awesome.
Well, it should be in the bookstores. If they're not, they can order them, or you can order them on any online service. You can order them through dreamchange.org. Go to my website, johnperkins.org. And incidentally, on both of those websites, johnperkins.org and dreamchange.org, I would really encourage people to subscribe to our newsletter, which comes out only about twice a month, so we don't overwhelm people with it. But I think there's some really good information in there. And they can order books through those sites too, or anywhere where you can buy books, you should be able to get mine. If they're not in stock, then just ask them to stock them.
That's terrific. And you have a ton of books too, not just Hoodwinked and Economic Hitman, but you have other books as well that are available on your 2 websites. Is that right?
It's true, yes. There's 5 that were published on indigenous people and shamanism, shape-shifting, the world as you dream it, psychonavigation. Those came out back in the 80s and 90s, and the more recent ones are the geopolitical ones, but there's a pretty good number there too on indigenous cultures and shamanism, but they're all really about transformation.
Yes, because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about transformation. John, thank you so much. I have so enjoyed our time together.
My pleasure, Nanice. I so appreciate it, and appreciate the work you're doing. And keep it up. It's the essence of freedom of the press and spreading the right information. Thank you.
It truly is. Thank you, John. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. We really can make a difference. You can make a difference. And the difference happens in the choices that you make, the thoughts that you think, the actions that you take. We listened to John today tell us about many ways that we can make a difference in our world. And now it's your turn. It's your turn to go out and live your life in a way that's responsible. And not just responsible to yourself and your family, but responsible to your planet, to your home, to the rest of the world, that we truly are connected to each other. And everything we do, think, say, and even believe affects everyone else on this planet. So today, I invite you to look inside and take the thoughts in your head and drop them down into your heart and start to make new choices that support you and support everyone, and just watch the magic happen in this world. I believe that we are creating paradise, and that you and I and everyone here are destined to do that. So today, remember, we truly are connected, we truly are one, and every choice matters. Every choice choice matters. Please visit me on my website at nanice.com. That's NANICE.com for tons of free articles, show downloads. And while you're there, don't forget to take the pledge. It will change your life and help you change the world. And also sign up for Divine Inspirations. It is a daily inspirational that I send out every day, and it's channeled, and it's really awesome if I do say so myself. So nanice.com, NANICE.com, and please email me. Let me know what you think, who you are, what you'd like to see on the show, and anything else you'd like to share. Until next week, you've been listening to Chai with Nanice. I'm Nanice. Have a great week. Bye for now.
Thank you for having Chai with Nanice. Please go to www.nanice.com for great free stuff that will empower you to live your best possible life. Free books, articles, shows, meditation audios, and so much more at nanice.com. That's NANICE.com. Nanice's books are also available in all major bookstores and Amazon. Check out The Infinite Power of You, Even Gandhi Got Hungry and Buddha Got Mad, Zest Point, Lip Prints, and many others by Nanice Ellis. To find out about one-on-one coaching and how Nanice can personally coach you to experience your best life possible, please email mybestlife@nanice.com.
If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And please join me on my website at nanice.com. That's NANICE.com. Thank you.